Hello, in this video I'm going to walk through our Matchmaker demo. Our Matchmaker demo shows off how you can create your own matchmaker and your own rock, paper, scissors game or any other type of multiplayer game using Game Plumbing Framework. So let's start by downloading the project. Once it's downloaded, we can open it up in Unity. Okay, now let's run Test Runner to make sure our unit tests work. Before I run, I'm just going to make sure that I am in simulated backend. Run. And that worked. So now let's go take a look at our test. And we notice that we have two players here. And we have a matchmaker ID. And then player actions is just going to run a script for each player. And so let's look at that script. Each player gets its own instance of sinker. The first player used the sinker that was passed in, and the second player had to create a sinker. So, as you might recall, every unit test task has a sinker that's passed in. But if we have multi-players, we're going to have to create a sinker for players after that first player. Here we are taking our ID, our matchmaker ID, and setting it to our match player SO. So we can take a look at match player SO a little bit. It has a set matchmaker. This is the server object that represents the player's state on the cloud. And it has a state that starts out as idle. And then that state becomes matchmaking, table offered, table accepted, game started, game waiting, and then some resolution on the game. Also notice that match player SO has several handlers that handle messages from the client. Match player SO is one of those SOs that can talk to the client. In fact, it's syncable, which means the client automatically gets synced to the latest version of Match Player SO. It also speaks to a couple of SOs that are not syncable. For example, Matchmaker SO and Match Game SO. So let's take a look at a couple of examples there. Here, if the user wants to reject the match or cancel the match, we're handling this reject message by informing the matchmaker to do the rejection or to do the cancel. And so that's an example of match player SO talking to matchmaker. It also will talk to the game. For example, here, when the client wants to make a move, we're going to send that move over to the game. And the way we get the game ID to begin with is through the start game message. So here we have a start game message which we handle from Matchmaker SO, and then we're just setting our game. This is the ID of the match game SO. So let's go back to our test and keep reading through the script. So here we're going to wait until our state is no longer in the initial state. and then we're going to tell match player SO that we're ready to get a match. And then we're going to wait until we're in the tabled offered state, and we're going to accept that offer. And once the other player has also accepted the offer, now we're in the game started state, and we're going to send our move. And move was a passed in parameter. Player 1 played rock, player 2 played paper. So our assumption here is that player 1 is going to lose and player 2 is going to win. And so we wait for the outcome that we anticipated. And if any of these waits take longer than the timeout, then the test fails. So we've actually auto-generated a diagram of this whole interaction. So we're going to go through it real quick. Here we have two clients with one is /RTBT and the other is /091K. And these clients, they basically do the exact same thing because they follow that player action script. First they say set matchmaker to their match player. Each one of them has their own match player. And then they ask for a match. The match player is going to basically forward that request over to the matchmaker. So here the matchmaker has two match requests. It's going to create an offer. It's going to send one of those offers over to the first match player, and it sends another offer over to the second. And here the match player accepts that offer. Just like over here, the match player is accepting that offer as a consequence of the client having accepted that offer. And then the matchmaker gets two accepts, so he's going to tell he's going to create a match game. So now we have a match game, and the match game has a reference to both players. So the match game is now going to communicate with the players directly. So the match game sends a start game over to the first match player, as well as sending a start game over to the second match player. And upon receiving that, their states are updated and the clients know that they need to move. So the client sends the move over to the match player, and the match player sends that move back to the game, and that happens on both sides. And then the match game determines who won, and we'll send that in the end game. And that's not hackable because that's going on the server. So that's a quick run through of all of the logic, and I would recommend trying to match that up with the code. So now let's build and run the game from Unity. So we go into Unity, and before I do this, I want to make sure that I'm on cloud mode now. Because we're doing a multiplayer game, we need to be in cloud mode, and we also need to do a build and run as well as run the game in the editor so we can have our two clients simulated. So I'm going to double click our scene to select it, and I'm going to go to build settings, and I need to make sure that the screen settings are set correctly. So I'll click on player settings, and we'll come in and we'll make sure we're windowed so we can toggle easily. And now we can do our build and run. Create a new folder called build. So let's join matchmaking, join matchmaking, accept, accept, rock, scissors. You won, you lost. Perfect. Now that we've seen the game work, let's walk through the hierarchy and see how it's all put together. So first we're going to go to controller and let's look at the match controller. And one thing you'll notice is we have start, and in start we create a syncer, we get a player ID, we sync to our player, match player, which is a match player SO, and we give match player an alias so we can sync to it inside the data store and bind to the variables. And then we have all of these button callback functions. So essentially, we'll have buttons, and then we will send, when that button is pressed, we're going to send a message up to the match player. So our personal match player SO. And so we have start matchmaking, stop matchmaking, accept match, reject match, move, a couple of moves, and a leave. So the really crazy thing is, at this point, you have now seen all of the code required to make the demo work. So we've gone through a unit test, 3 different SOs, the match player SO, matchmaker SO, and match game SO, and this controller. And we don't require any more code. The rest is just UI setup. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So if we go to Canvas, we have a background, we have this thing called game states, and it is a select child view binding. And so it's going to look at matchPlayer.state. So as you might recall, we went through that state variable here. Let's see. So here was state, and here's all the different states. And that's going to drive basically which one of these children is visible. And so here's the default. It's initial, the initial state. Another thing to look at is we have an animation controller on each one of these. And this is where we have defined the on open and on close. And I go through how that works in detail in a different video on the the view bindings, provided view bindings guide page. But so we have initial, idle. Inside idle we have some text. It just says join matchmaking. Here's the matchmaking state. It just says waiting for a match, and it gives you a cancel button. So the text says cancel, and if we look at the button, it is tied to matchController.stopMatchmaking, which, as we just saw, just sends that message over. Table offered, it just says match found, and you can either accept it. Here's the accept button, and again, it's just tied to the script inside the controller. And actually, everything has that pattern. So all we did here was we defined the states, and we put buttons on these states. And because this is how our select child VB, what it's going to do is it's going to look at this state, and it's going to present the game object that correlates with that state. And that's how this whole demo works. So I hope you learned a lot about how to make your own matchmaker. Like I said, Game Plumbing does not have an official matchmaker. We have an example, and we give you all the tools where you can build your own. And you can even see how easy it is to take something that's complicated and have many states, and just how easy it is to get the UI hooked up once you have the state logic working. So, thank you so much.